what is your philosophy around hiring great talent? And let's go through some of the methodology you have. If you have any best practices around each piece of that process as you try to bring them on board, from profiling the role, sourcing and interviewing them, evaluating, closing, onboarding, etc. So what's your philosophy and what's kind of your methodology and your process that you go through with some tactics that you use?
Yeah, first I would say I'm a recruiter's worst nightmare as a former recruiter to work with as a hiring manager. If any of them were listening to this, they'd probably laugh. And I think ultimately we have good working relationships, but like to say I expect a lot and have a very high bar for hiring is an understatement. I would say what I learned from my recruiting experience, and then what I learned from some mentors early on, was the two things I was hiring for were mentality and then dynamic. And I think the second one is something that people don't pay enough attention to when they're hiring. And I think it's really important to be intentional when you're putting a team or teams together, that you also need to be hiring for a team dynamic. And you have to have the right blend of backgrounds and experiences of people on that team. And if you just hire a lot of people with the right mentality that are just high achieving people, but won't create the right team dynamic, that team's not going to be actually as effective as they otherwise could be. So I pretty quickly realized that you needed to hire for diversity and hire for a specific dynamic. And that ultimately meant that there were times where I passed on people that I knew would have been very successful individually, but wouldn't have been additive to the team and the team dynamic. I would say like that's a big thing I learned early on at LinkedIn. And the second thing I learned was you have to be intentional. So what I mean by that is intentional around your recruiting process and your interview process, and be consistent. I think the tendency when you're moving really quickly and are in an environment where you're hiring fast is you just need to just hire great people and set them free. And I think people don't spend enough time up front really defining and being intentional around what their hiring process should be. What are the types of interview questions and interview experiences and exposures you want to have for that person that's coming in, to make sure you're consistently testing for certain things to see if they're going to be successful in your environment, but also make sure that they're going to be happy in your environment and for the state that you're in. And I definitely learned the hard way several times that you need to hire for the current state of things and don't oversell an opportunity or a role. You should not be afraid to talk about all the hairy problems that your company has. And the people that are going to be right for you, like when you mention all the challenges that you and the team are facing, they're going to light up. They're going, literally, you'll watch their body language change if you're in the room with them, where they're going to lean in and be like, tell me more about that. Like, they're going to be attracted to those types of problems in that environment. And so often I see people, especially at high growth companies, trying to hire people who've just been there and done that at larger companies and have been, quote unquote, in the end zone, so to speak. And that's really risky, because if you've hired people who've only worked at very large established companies, they might have great training, but they might not possess the mindset to be successful in a fast-paced, ambiguous environment.
I like that. So very quickly, you've hired a lot of people in a spectrum of different roles. Can you go through and talk about how you onboard really good talent as well? What are some of the things you've learned about onboarding great talent that you felt have been consistent regardless of the role that you're bringing on?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think onboarding is a staged, kind of sequenced process that you can't try to throw everything at someone up front in the first 2 weeks. They're not going to retain 90% of the information you give them. And so I think you need to be very specific and intentional around, the prioritization of what they need to know and at what time they need to teach them it. And really make sure you get the sequencing right there. And that'll be the difference between an okay onboarding and a really rapid one. Is like, what's really critical in the first, couple quarters for this person to know and learn, and really focus just on those things, and then get comfortable not teaching someone some of the finer skills that they're going to need, 6 or 12 months later, and stage it out. Make sure that those things are things you focus on as like the next onboarding once they're 6 or 9 months in. So really think about those things. The other thing I would say about onboarding is I'm a huge fan of situational leadership theory, or the Hersey Blanchard theory on coaching. And for those, go Google it and check it out. You can watch a quick video, or look at just a Google image on and kind of map it out. But the other thing I realized early on is no matter how much experience someone has that you're hiring, their early onboarding, you actually need to be very explicit and very directive with them around what you expect and what you want them to do. And no matter how much experience they have, they actually find a lot of confidence in having this like blanket of you being really directional. And I think the hesitation people have is like, well, I don't want to micromanage someone. And like, I don't want to seem like I'm being overly burdensome on them. It's like, no, I know that's your instinct of us, and we don't want to do that because no one really likes to be micromanaged. But early on, when you're new to a company, people find a lot of safety and confidence in that. So I think it's really important to be directive early on. Also, be very clear early on around the expectations of the role. Define what excellence looks like in the role and how someone should be kind of conducting themselves, and what their performance should look like over time, and what behaviors they should exhibit and how they match back to your cultural values. Really lay that out early on. I can't tell you how many people I talk to where I'm like, what are your cultural values and how do you talk about them in the first 2 weeks of onboarding? And they're like, I can't, or even just companies that I've interviewed or spent time with or advised, where I ask them like what their cultural values. Like if you can't name them off the top of your tongue immediately, something's missing there. You need to go back and revisit that.